Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the post-Superman discussion series video, I guess you could say. I promised that we'd be getting into a bunch of different questions from you guys after Superman. I mean, at this point, I think all of us who would be watching this video has already seen it, maybe more than once. I'm about to see it for a third time today. But before I do, it's time for a good old chit-chat with whatever you guys have for me. So honestly, without further ado, let's just get into this. All I'll say is, if you're going to enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate a like on it. And if you're brand new here, I mean, consider subscribing, because the DCU is just beginning and we've got a lot more to come on this channel. So right away here with Twin Rivers 6200 saying, this movie has great critic support and an A- cinema score from fans. It doesn't have to hit 700 million, though sure, the studio would have loved to have turned a profit, but it's already a success. It has done the job to help rehabilitate the DCU. That's what Warner Brothers needed. The DCEU killed off any hope with their last string of movies. This movie is rehab. So I completely agree with the latter of what you were saying there, and by the time you're watching this, I don't know if you've already seen my previous video, which was a news roundup, and in the first like 10 to 15 minutes of that video, we go over the box office so far, which again, by the time you're watching this, would have changed. But it's true, all while this movie will struggle to see the light of 700 plus million, you know, again, most predictions are now in the 550 to, you know, it'd be great to get to $650 million range. The main achievement or goal, I would say, is, as Twin Rivers just said here, this movie is a rehab for the DC brand in cinemas. And, well, not even just cinemas, but like also to get audiences locked into a new venture with DC, with a new canon that is going to span not only movies, but, you know, making you want to watch Lanterns and other things like on Max or HBO. So I think we can all agree here, whether you like or dislike the movie, that it is being highly rated by audiences and critics alike. That doesn't mean every single last audience member or every single last critic out there. Of course, there's lots of in between, but it's very clear that this movie is a success with a lot of audiences out there, and that will catapult people into being more interested in future installments from the DCU to come. The fact remains that Warner Brothers should be able to break even, not to mention with other revenue aspects that it will be looking at, such as merchandising. There will be the licensing with this movie, you know, eventually going on to other platforms. There will be, you know, the tax stuff with this movie. That there's all kinds of things that they can still collect on when it comes to Superman that will ultimately not make them lose out on this movie in a financial way. Don't get me wrong, it won't mean a supersized punch of revenue for them either, but what is there at the end of the day? Oh, okay, for a first movie in this DCU, where if there's one thing above all else that we needed to do, is to rehabilitate the brand of DC with this first venture that had huge pressure on it to do so. Did we achieve that? Yes. I think most people are in agreement there. And the reason why I'm going to end this question off here, but the reason why I stress that so much, and I bring up things like this critical consensus and the overall majority audience consensus out there, is because when you look at things like the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think I gave a decent example in my last video in how the reason why the pressure on this was so important to at least achieve that most important thing with winning and rehabilitating is because imagine if this movie released and the critic score was like 47% and the audience score was like 39 or something like that. That is where, you know, you could dunk on this movie all day long. It would have been a complete and utter failure. The DCU, sure, Lanterns would have still come out. I'm sure Supergirl would have still come out, but that would have been very, very, very bad. This just isn't that. So when you look at it through that reality, that lens, that perspective, that's what you need to take away from Superman. And I would just love to hear everyone's overall thoughts on that. You know, what Twin Rivers said, what I kind of expanded on there, but also with the recent box office numbers in mind, and also take into account today's, if you've seen today's by the time I'm posting this video, because I'm filming it a bit in advance. Let me know what your predictions are for where things will truly end at the end of the box office run, bearing in mind that we've got freaking Fantastic Four, you know, taking the spotlight very, very, very soon. So Jeremy Mace Plus says, I think the through line is Luthor. He learns through the movie that Superman won because he had friends and allies. That means Luthor has to learn what it means to gain friends to gain allies, and that means the Legion of Doom. That leads us into storylines that can be Justice or Kingdom Come. Boba, thoughts? One thing we need to take into account is that Peter Safran literally said that Lex Luthor is going to be a major player in the DCU. We know that he got taken to Belle Reve at the end of Superman, so now it's like, okay, where are things truly going to go with this character? If we're going to see him again, as we know we literally are, how will that be? So, you know, will he make it to Belle Reve? That's another thing. Will he be busted out before he even gets there? I don't know about that. Like, if he's in Belle Reve, will we see a scene of him in there in a show like Peacemaker? Because we do know there's a major cameo in Peacemaker. And that makes me wonder, with the, you know, pocket dimension or the quantum unfolding technology that Peacemaker's father had, and we know that there's a freaking, as I like to call it, Monsters Inc. door within that quantum unfolding chamber that leads to this other dimension. Well, maybe Lex Luthor is consulted about this in Peacemaker, because after all, your boy literally made a pocket dimension as his own kind of detainment facility to house people from metahumans to ex-girlfriends and people he just didn't like. So I don't know if that is going to be the cameo, but I can see that being one way. But back to your larger point here, Jeremy. Okay, are we just leading up to like a Justice Gang turned into Justice League, Hall of Justice situation with more members there versus a Legion of Doom? I don't know if it's going to be that straightforward, that black and white, but I will say that I absolutely love the idea of Luthor starting to realize that, you know, he thought things were bad enough with metahumans out there, but as he says in the movies, that when Superman turned up, like, things just haven't, you know, nothing's been the same since. So with now Superman besting him, with now, you know, towards the end of the movie, especially with that scene with Rick Flag, the message being that metahumans really are the ones calling the shots now. He may choose to ally himself with other people out there, even though they, yes, may be metahumans, to kind of really be rid of the ones who are asserting the control of their sense of a moral compass, to enact his own, perhaps. Again, this is where you can go down all kinds of rabbit holes, but any theories anyone has about Lex Luthor's future appearances, do let me know. Do you think Luthor would prefer to get out in a shady legal way? Or do you think he really wouldn't mind getting out of there, being broken out of there, and kind of going dark until we see him pop up again? So Alex Piliel says, I'm not sure whether anyone has theorized this yet, but I want to believe that the second half of Jor-El's message was doctored by Brainiac. This would make it undetectable from any linguist, including Mr. Terrific, and would serve for a clever setup for future films. After all, Brainiac and Lex are similar, so much so that they even fused in Justice League Unlimited. It would make sense for Brainiac to foresee Clark being a force for good, and even foresee the rise of someone like Lex. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Brainiac himself who damaged the message so that it could go off at the right moment. Now, I completely appreciate reading theories like this, and I've seen so many. By the way, there was so many screenshots of you saying various different things. Like, what if the message was real? What if it was doctored? What if Brainiac could have something to do with it? All of this kind of stuff, but I'm still going to maintain my original thoughts on how I just don't think Gunn would have done this in the movie to just then flip the switch later on, when this was quite an important propelling, driving force for Superman's own story in the film, that it would feel kind of reductive to just flip it on its head. Now, I do understand why some of you still may say, well, that could still be true for this movie, but the door could still be left open for a bit of a change later. And I guess never quite say never there, and I'm hesitantly saying that, but there's even more evidence, in my opinion, for why what I'm saying could very well be the case. Just with what James Gunn has said, and I don't know how many of you have heard him be asked about the Jor-El message in an interview, and his answer kind of just further cements that, hey, we did this for this reason, and it sounds fairly clear-cut. So Gunn said, I'm a huge Superman fan, so first of all, I had to trust myself that I was going to honor the pieces of Superman that we needed to keep the same, and also allow myself to make changes where changes might work, and wouldn't go against the integrity of who the character is. And so I think that was simply dealing with some of those things, was simply dealing with allowing ourselves to change part of the story in a way that was interesting for the DCU, but that wasn't something that went against who Superman was. And it has been something that's been played with in the comics before. If you ask me, that's him doubling down on it. That's him saying, look, I had to trust myself that I was going to honor Superman, but at the same time, trust myself to also maybe allow some changes and make some changes that wouldn't go against the integrity of who the character is. And I know some people would debate that, saying, well, this is a part of who Superman is. But I think, again, what he means there is you can still have Superman be Superman while changing something like this. That, if anything, while some, and many even, may disagree with this part of the story being in the movie, it can still propel Superman's journey and personal struggle and identity. But just to kind of hammer it in, I again, with what Gunn said, hammering down in that interview, that quote, and then, the movie pretty much maintaining the consistency of that message being true, even though, don't worry, I hear you guys saying the movie says it too much to the point of where it must not be true because they go out of their way to keep saying it. Like, I think this is going to be one of those where that theory won't die out for some people. But I'd love to know what you guys think after hearing James Gunn say that. Has it changed your mind at all, or are you still kind of dead set that the door was left slightly ajar? For me, I don't think so, but please do let me know. Now, kind of still on this subject in a way, Christopher Roberts 548 says, if Supergirl left Krypton as a teenager, how come she doesn't know her aunt and uncle are evil? Why didn't Supergirl tell Clark? Well, Kara left Argo City. Don't forget that in this iteration, Kara, her mother and father, left on Argo. Well, they left on Argo City. Argo City was a chip off of Krypton after it exploded that floated around in space, but due to Argo City's vicinity to a sun, basically, without giving too much away, it caused very, very hazardous conditions, which is what led Supergirl to eventually come to Earth as a teenager. And, I guess a few years go by, and we're kind of where we're at now with Millie Alcock, I suppose, her Kara approaching her 21st birthday, if they are straight up adapting that from the first pages of the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow story. But before I get too off track here, nevertheless, Kara did obviously see Krypton, and she still lived among a Kryptonian society on Argo City. So why are we assuming that Kara would know that Jor-El and Lara were going to send this message? Also, to add a cherry on the cake there, what if everyone in Kryptonian society, not everyone would necessarily have the same thoughts as what Jor-El and Lara did? What if Kara's father and mother weren't thinking like that at all? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily inherently make every Kryptonian out there evil. I mean, just think about maybe the times that Kara has interacted with Jor-El or Lara and other Kryptonians out there. I doubt it's been like in such a way where they were so diabolical and evil. I'm sure they had a great time together in their own Kryptonian society and cultural kind of ways, right? Like, there's no precedent here to start to believe as to why Kara would have been aware of something, especially that was probably exclusive to Lara and Jor-El in that moment as they're pre-recording a message for a pod that they're about to put their baby in. Like, as the planet is literally about to blow up. Does this guarantee every Kryptonian thinks the same? No. This is the choice and words of two individuals out of a whole Kryptonian planet that's about to blow up. Sure, you could still say, is it outside the realms of possibility to believe that other Kryptonians, with their potential indifference to less advanced human species, that they may think the same? So Kara's parents? Maybe. And maybe, yeah, maybe this is what we're going to get into with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow flashbacks, because, you know, in the comic, they absolutely get into Argo City flashbacks, and I think this is something that can't really be ignored, and that is to dive into a bit of the Kryptonian society and culture. And it's not like they're going to necessarily be like, have dialogue being like, oh, so what do we think of Earth and Earthlings? But you would have to think they'd still revisit this subject in some way, such as when Kara's father finally has that moment in where he decides to send Kara to Earth. But at the same time, that still remains to be seen. We're going to have to wait and see how Argo City Kryptonians are executed, what those final moments are like before Kara herself is sent to Earth. But I would love to know everyone's thoughts about this one, because if you think about it just for a few minutes, I don't see any reason as to why Kara would have arrived there as a teenager and just been like, oh yeah, by the way, like, your dad, but he's pretty evil, man. Like, yeah, like, he's a pretty bad dude. I don't think Jor-El would have acted evil on Krypton, and she wouldn't have known any different, let alone these instructions that his parents would have given him upon arriving to Earth. It would be pretty mental as well if actually Jor-El's brother, Kara's father, didn't share those same views that Jor-El did about Earth and actually opposed them. And they somehow got into that in Supergirl without Supergirl finding out about Jor-El's message. But anyway, I've been rambling about this one for a while, but I just don't think Kara knew. Long story short. So Philanthropy 3619 says, I get why people are upset about the change to the law, but I love what Gunn did. This is the first movie to make it clear that Ma and Pa are what made the man part of Superman. I think the ending was a beautiful tribute to the people around us who make us us. Well done, Mr. Gunn. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I know both can exist, and that's some people's problem with this, saying, well, you could have still done both, like good Kryptonian parents and good Ma and Pa highlighted. I completely get you. But regardless, I loved the ending of this movie as well. It was absolutely wonderful, sincere, emotional. It was such a nice payoff, and very well said with how you explained. I think the ending was a beautiful tribute to the people around us who make us us. Now, this isn't me taking digs at like the traditionalist kind of Jor-El kind of thing, but truly, Superman, sure, like he probably would have gone on to use his powers for good anyway, but Jor-El's like, hey man, you can do this, you can do that, you can give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards this, that, and the other. Like, I love that, but also with what Pa Kent said in this film, like, parents aren't there to kind of, and I'm butchering this quote, but like, he basically was saying, they don't choose what you or who you get to be and what you do. So again, just highlighting that whole Gunn thing that he was going for with the Jor-El change. This is why I said in both my reviews, I think I'm ultimately fine with it. I have a preference, and that is the traditionalist kind of Jor-El thing, where I still feel like you could have done just as much powerful things with Ma and Pa Kent. But again, with it like a new iteration, you know, adaptation's not always copy and pasting, as I often say. Don't try not deviate, but you can innovate. I can see why Gunn went for this, and it's still something that can be appreciated in my mind, all while I completely understand why it's kicked up a bit of a stir with some people just really quite not knowing where they land on it. So Dario UK says, and I've seen a lot of people say this, I think Ultraman will be back as his full zombie Bizarro. Now, man, I don't know what to think of this one, because I think it's just like the knee-jerk easy theory to go with. And it's not me saying that it won't happen one day, but I guess I want to know what people mean, like, when they say that. Like, have they thought about how he will appear again? Do they think we're going to get a whole separate Superman project with, like, Ultraman being Bizarro as, like, the main antagonist? Because I would argue that guy wouldn't be very well, like, wouldn't be that entertaining, because, you know, Ultraman was like a pretty much blank canvas, and just because he's degraded into Bizarro, and, you know, let's say that black hole did, you know, somehow teleport him into an alternate universe, a Bizarro world, he's come back and he can kind of be a bit more, he has a bit more depth to him. I don't know. Like, I know there's that newspaper clipping as well that already details Bizarro's been spotted. I fully get, and it was like it wasn't just like a repeated words kind of prop. It was a full-on article, like clipping of Bizarro being spotted and describing Bizarro to a comic book accurate T and everything. It was super interesting. But obviously with that not being highlighted in the movie, it's not technically canon. So the theory therefore with Ultraman being Bizarro is still very much so on the table, because you can't take into account Bizarro in that newspaper clipping being canon. But I think if they were going to make him Bizarro, I would have liked a bit more of an effort to show him degrading with the mask off. I think that would have been really cool. I know that they did that kind of little zombie screech as he went into the black hole. Maybe that's a little something there. I know some people were mentioning the cubes going into the black hole. I could be wrong. He could be like, but Boba, he could. Maybe he could. But the more you really think about it, like proper, like think about it, I feel like Gunn's just going to choose to adapt a different villain or like further a different story rather than bring back this muscle, this henchman who didn't really have much to him in the movie as a more significant character, you know, which has been, you know, housed on top of just something that doesn't have like a truly interesting foundation. Because again, I think a lot of people do agree that, like, you know, as entertaining as Ultraman was, he wasn't so interesting as a character. So does just automatically making him Bizarro make him in? I would actually rather, to be honest, Bizarro be Bizarro from a different, like, actual reality, like a Bizarro world, where he was actually Superman, but in the Bizarro sense, right? Like, again, like one of the most recent adaptations being Superman and Lois, that Bizarro Earth kind of thing. There's a lot more depth there with that character. Like, to just make, like, do you see where I'm going with this? I'm not trying to hate on it, but I'm just saying, to make Ultraman a blank canvas, just pop up, like, hey, I'm Bizarro now. It's like, hey, I feel like the fangoggles in us want to be like, oh, he could be Bizarro, but the more you kind of peel back the layers, it's like, wouldn't you rather like an actual decent foundation for a Bizarro rather than just slapping the label of Bizarro on a character who was a bit of a dummy who got sent through a black hole? That's kind of the way I view that for now, but I'm open to being, I guess, impressed with whatever they could dish up if they do make it Ultraman in the future. But that's if they do even actually give us Bizarro in the future of the DCU, with everything else that we might actually tackle before then. So next up from Urslo24494, what did you think about Lois Lane in this movie? Well, I completely gassed Rachel Brosnahan up in my no spoilers review. I think, you know, her chemistry with David Corenswet is just absolutely stellar. It's electric. There's such, you know, authenticity there to their characters that match their comic book counterparts. I loved seeing the reporter side to her when she was interviewing Clark. It wasn't, you know, there's such a tenacity there with Lois that I really love in all kinds of different iterations. So seeing Rachel Brosnahan get into reporter mode throughout the movie was awesome. Now, having said that, I think one of the things for me, and I say this out of love of just having wanted to have seen more, is that I can't say that there wasn't a whole bunch of real reporting in the movie, because she does consistently strive to get Clark out of the pocket dimension, this, that, and the other, look into Lex and stuff. But it's undercut, in my opinion, by what I mentioned in my spoiler-free review with that plot contrivance between Jimmy Olsen and Eve Teschmacher. So all I mean to say there is, and again, like, this is just me trying to offer some valid criticism here. It's not like we saw this crazy reporting happen with Lois and the Daily Planet crew, and where they literally unearthed, you know, some of the diabolical plans that Lex Luthor had, and you know, fought tooth and literal nail to kind of crack the code there to then get to those latter parts of the movie, or the midpoint of the movie onwards, right? To then get to the beach encampment, to then save Superman, to then expose Lex towards that final scene. What was it all sourced by? Oh, the fact that Jimmy Olsen happened to have dated the very person that Lex Luthor is romantically involved with, Eve Teschmacher. Like, that is why I called that a massive convenience, and I know not everyone has the same standards or, like, kind of rating criteria for a movie, but the writing there, in my opinion, is indisputably convenient, right? Again, let me spell it out to you guys. Jimmy Olsen in the Daily Planet office, the very office that is trying to take down Lex Luthor in the plot of the movie. How convenient could it have been that he happens to know the woman who could provide him every droplet of evidence he could ever want to take down Lex Luthor. So do you see what I mean? Yes, Lois and the Daily Planet crew brought that to the forefront. I like that scene when she's in the T-ship and she starts talking out loud the Daily Planet report to expose Luthor, and Jimmy's like typing it all down. Like, I loved all of that. That's like, this is what I mean. The essence of Lois Lane reporting like that. Like Rachel Brosnahan had it down to a T. I have absolutely no issues with that. I'm just saying I would have liked to have seen like the Daily Planet crew and Lois kind of, and I'm not saying Lois didn't have enough scenes or anything like that. My God, like, you know, again, she went to the Hall of Justice, she went to go get Mr. Terrific, like all of that, like, is great. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying on a reporting level, I just wish that they kind of, I wish Eve Teschmacher, like that plot contrivance just wasn't a thing. Now, maybe the movie didn't have time for it, but, you know, I feel like in a traditional Superman and Lois story in a comic book or whatever else, they would have explored how Lois would have found out that Clark was in the pocket dimension rather than Jimmy being like, oh, Lois, he's in a pocket dimension. You owe me one. You owe me one. And she's like, oh, Jimmy, I freaking love you. And then like, oh, you need to know evidence about this. Oh, I've got all these pictures here. So do you see what I mean? There wasn't much working for it there. I just know when I'm saying this as well, it's going to alienate some people. And it drives me insane sometimes because I feel like I don't feel like I'm saying anything bad here. I'm just saying, like, literally what happened in the movie. So, yeah, loved Lois Lane. Just feel like they could have maybe have written the story in such a way where the Daily Planet earned the scoops, if you will, on where Superman was and all the other things that came with it. So Mr. Movie Mafia says, I get people saying we didn't get enough of characters like Hawkgirl, Perry, and the Engineer, but I don't mind. We also didn't get much of Nebula or Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. That first movie didn't have a B plot, nor does Superman, and they didn't really get developed until the sequels, but now they're fan favorites. Since this is the first movie, I think the shorter runtime and tighter focus on Clark, Lois, and Lex is perfectly sensible, and we got just enough of the side characters to be interested in seeing more of them in the future without taking screen time away from the plot. So this one's hard because I don't fully agree, but also fully disagree with what you're saying there. So when I said what I've said in my previous couple of reviews, when I say that I would have liked to have seen more from other characters, whether that be even Clark Kent himself, a little bit more from the Hawkgirl, the Engineer, maybe some Perry White, just little dribs and drabs and stuff like that. I'm not talking like making this movie 3 hours. I was talking like 10 to 15 minutes longer. And without credits, this movie is 1 hour and 58 minutes. So what, 10 minutes longer? 2 hours, 8 minutes, 15 minutes longer, 2 hours, 13 minutes. Like, heck, you could even stretch it to 2 hours, 18 minutes, and this movie would not have been a long movie. So do you see what I mean? With I would say the majority of people agreeing that this movie, as much as we feel like it's a strength of the film, that the pacing's quite chaotic with all the stuff and comic book chaos that it gets into is a cool thing. It's also a bit of a drawback with the breakneck pacing that it has. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that if you just included a couple of additional scenes in where, you know, I'm pretty sure they were filmed anyway, to be honest with you, where you just had a couple more scenes in it. Like, again, this isn't like entire B plots where you dive into Hawkgirl's backstory or the Engineer's backstory in 20 minutes of depth. I feel like my points are being misconstrued because I've seen a few people say this. I'm just talking going from 1 hour, 58 minutes to 2 hours, 13, 14, 15 minutes. That way we could have basically have still had a very similar movie. It's just that you would have maybe have left a little bit more time within scenes for certain characters, or maybe have included a couple of additional scenes where we only got, like, again, 3 to 5 more lines of dialogue for certain characters. So you know how we had a little bit more of Guy Gardner in the movie. Imagine like a couple more lines like we had from Guy Gardner given to Hawkgirl. I feel like that would have just felt like quite significant compared to what we did get, and it would have still have served to what you just said there, Mr. Movie Mafia, with how, you know, we just got enough of the side characters to be interested in seeing more of them. I don't think with this edition of mine, personally, that we would have felt like we would have got too much. We would have still have been interested to see more Hawk go. It just would have felt more balanced. Like, imagine if, like, earlier on in the film where we had the Daily Planet, we could have seen, like, another 45 seconds there. That wouldn't have felt like, now I say this to you, like, crazy, right, to add into the film, but it would have just maybe have given us something with Ron Troop, where now we have no lines from him in the movie, I'm pretty sure. And just stuff like that, like Cat Grant. So I don't know if people really are going to get truly what I mean by that. And again, I'm not on about like crazy development that you wouldn't see until the second or third installments. I wanted all of that in the first film. No, I don't want all of that development. I just wanted like a little bit more, just a little bit more. And I feel like the cutting of the movie also does kind of indicate that there was a cut where it maybe did go for like 2 hours, 15 minutes or something like that. But for various reasons, they cut it down even more. And I'm not saying, again, another thing is, I'm not saying that this movie's cut as it stands doesn't work, because clearly it does. A lot of people, you know, again, critics, audience, are enjoying the movie. But I am going to definitely stand by what I've said here and how I think you could have just peppered in a few more moments with some of the other characters, and it would have still maintained the overall structure of the movie. It wouldn't have significantly changed things, but it would have just given just a little bit more oomph to those areas, and that would have just been nice to see. Up next from The Whisper, hey Boba, for the discussion video, my question is, after seeing Mr. Terrific in action in Superman, how strong do you think DCU Batman would be? Mr. Terrific was able to take out a small army without breaking a sweat. How would Batman do in that situation? You raise such a good point, to the point of where, again, it just kind of in this very moment reinvigorates my hype of seeing an all-out fantastical DCU Batman. Like, guys, like, really think about what The Whisper just said there. In the movie, we saw Mr. Terrific. Granted, he's got T-Spheres, but we know Batman, like, especially in the fantastical DCU, with the amount of tech that he has as well. Like, my God, he could pull off some things as well. But, yeah, think about it. There was multiple Raptors, Lex Troopers there. And he, yeah, didn't break a sweat. And it was so effortlessly done. Now, yeah, like, I know we've talked about this before, but now, yeah, technically seeing Mr. Terrific in action like that, and now you think, oh yeah, but DCU Batman, this is Batman we're talking about. Imagine what he could do. I mean, that's not me trying to put down Mr. Terrific, but it's just, it kind of goes hand in hand to help your imagination view what a Batman with experience, with a Batcave, with Bat family built up around him to some extent could pull off. And man, I wanted to highlight this question because we've just, it's something that maybe has occurred to some of you already, but just reading that out loud really just set my imagination alight with excitement and just more of a clear vision of seeing Batman whoop God knows how many asses in a scene. So you ask me, how would Batman do in this situation? I mean, God, like, he would probably arrive, and then, like, he would probably have, like, God knows what kind of gadgets coming out. So he'd get some batarangs, he'd fling them out there, they would distract them and ping them, they would maybe be infused with electrical charges that would send, you know, like how we had the T-Sphere electrocute one guy or a couple of guys, there'd be that. Then, before you'd know it, he'd be in the Raptor's face with a flying boot kick. There'd be all of this stuff going on, and as he's doing that, he's already 10 steps ahead, and he's already probably grappling one guy over there. Maybe there's something on the beach encampment that he can grapple towards and also ignite, which would blow up and send a freaking concussive wave to send other people. Like, it would all be done within kind of like a flick of the cape. And yeah, I guess my request to you guys would be, now imagine, after seeing that Mr. Terrific scene, Batman in that scene, knowing what the DCU is capable of doing with that James Gunn camera movement there that they did, the way the action scene went out, and just, yeah, imagine Batman, and I guarantee you'll thank me just because of how awesome your imagination will be. Like, oh my God, I just kind of realized, again, we're getting a DCU Batman, and if this is just, like, honestly, a taster in the first DCU project of what somebody like Mr. Terrific can do, dude, just you wait until we get something like The Brave and the Bold, or, you know, if we get a World's Finest, or eventually, we know we're getting some kind of Justice League thing eventually, what that's going to be like. It's going to be Dude, I have no words. So someone you used to know says Superman's apartment is a world's finest Easter egg. And I think I know exactly what you're saying here. I would love a recreation of what you're probably seeing on screen right now. Now, I know there's like an Easter egg in the movie where there's like a road sign and it says Gotham City, keep left. So I've seen a lot of people talk about like, has Superman really not met Batman if their cities are pretty damn close to one another to the point of where there's like a road sign? It's like, okay, Gotham, keep left. You keep going this way, keep driving, maybe over a bridge kind of thing. You know, maybe he has met the Batman, or maybe not. I mean, I don't know, but I would love Superman to look out those windows. And I love how he goes in that window. It's great. And then, like, eventually one day, he sees Batman on, like, a rooftop in the distance, and he's got his binoculars out, and then Batman's just like this or whatever and just flies away. We're gonna have to wait and see how Gunn does it, but, like, knowing Gunn, and obviously there's a lot to learn here with, you know, what has happened and what hasn't happened in the DCU's history between these characters, but I know he's probably gonna do extremely comic book accurate things in all the best kind of goofy, yet also world's finest friendshipy kind of ways with Batman and Superman that we would love to see. So I'm very much so anticipating that. Any theories you have as well, by the way? Do you think that Superman has met Batman in this world? I think in my mind, they've got to be aware of each other. Like, in the same way where, like, when we first see Superman interact with his metahuman compatriots for the first time in the film, he already, like, I think Mr. Terrific is like, you know, what's the situation when, you know, there's a whole kaiju thing going on. And they're already, like, talking. Like, the movie tells you these two know each other. There's two superheroes. They're talking already. So, in that same way of how he knows Horgo, he knows Mr. Terrific, he knows Guy Gardner, like, they know his identity as Clark Kent. I think you can just, like, I can imagine in the future, Gunn will just pick up with being like, yeah, oh yeah, like, Batman and Superman already have talked before. So, like, if they were in a scene similar to, like, this kaiju situation, Batman could, in theory, just talk to Superman. And you'd be like, wait, do these guys, they're talking like they know each other. That kind of vibe, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. So I feel like that will be the case in how they are already aware of one another, and maybe that was in the past 3 years. I mean, it would have to be, right? But at the same time, I do see the merit in, like, this charm of them meeting for the first time, not doing like a, you know, tense BVS kind of thing in the slightest, but like there being this kind of charming kind of buddy superhero thing between Batman and Superman in some kind of plot for a movie. But let me know if you prefer that, or if you prefer them having already met a couple of times, but maybe never having truly got to know each other well enough, and then the movie picks up there where they have that past, but now they're really embarking on a plot that brings them closer together. But with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have time for today. Let me know your thoughts on everything I said. Expand on the questions we got into down in the comments below. I can't wait to interact with you guys there. If you enjoyed this video, and especially if you've got this far, I'd greatly appreciate a like on it. It goes a long way to support the channel. Consider subscribing for more additional bonus DCU Superman videos just like this. But until next time, just thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.